Mayor Mike Hurley, good to have you on. You're a musician, aren't you?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd call myself a musician now, but I was a musician, and I don't play enough anymore to consider myself a true musician.
So should we do this interview from musician to Mayor of Burnaby? So that how we theme it?
Well, you can see that musician. I'm a carpenter by trade,
okay.
and firefighters.
What's a little bit of your backstory? Where you come from?
I come from County Derry, up in the north of Ireland, and very proud of the area I come from, which is Magherafelt, very small town. But I'm from an even smaller village that I won't even mention because no one will ever.
I'm from a tiny little place. You got to mention.
Called Gaelic.
Gaelic?
And the parish of Lavi, and grew up one of a family of 8,
okay.
3 brothers, 4 sisters. You know, just lived a normal Irish life of, you know, going to school and enjoying the sports and enjoying the music. And, you know, if you get engaged in the Irish culture, you're either going to be part of, you know, saying poems or telling stories or being a musician or dancing. And we had many ceilidhs around our area, and my role was always part of playing music.
Many which? What's a ceilidh?
Well, ceilidh would be an Irish form of getting together. You know, some have ceilidh dancing, which is a different format. But we had ceilidh houses in our area when I grew up, and people would go there and just get together of the community. And so some people would sing, some people would dance, some people would play fiddle, and that was how the night went. That was how we entertained ourselves.
So your small town, was that? Would you go there, or like how small was the small place that you came from?
400.
400.
Yeah, but I had 3 pubs. But it was 400 people.
Still pretty rough. Is that be not uncommon in a town, or is that a lot of pubs for 400 people?
Well, I don't think so. I think that would be pretty common in Ireland.
Yeah,
you would know more about pubs.
Yeah, well, the small village in the west of Ireland I'm from, Crockwell, there's about 3,000 people, and we have 3 pubs. So they were doing better.
We were well represented.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah.
So they're called ceilidhs? You get together?
Yeah, the ceilidhs, that's what we called them. I don't know if you witnessed that.
Is it the same across Ireland?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like a session, you know. Yeah. A session, and people would get together and play some music and tell some stories. And
so you're not getting lessons. Everybody's sort of learning as a community. The kids are just growing up around it, that type of thing, right?
Yeah, it's just part of what the community did, I think, to communicate and to be together, and they were a lot of fun. You know,
it's like a networking.
Yeah.
That's how we network in Ireland. We have ceilidhs.
Yep.
That sounds way better than the networking events here.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Hi, good to meet you. Hi, good to meet you.
Sometimes it goes on for days.
Yes.
What was outside of that? What was the environment? I mean, what year was that? You're growing up, 10 years old. What year was it?
It would have been all through the 70s. So they were tough times in Northern Ireland. There was what they called the Troubles were a full swing, and certainly my area felt that a lot.
Yeah.
And but very high level of unemployment amongst boys, and that in itself can create lots of issues within a community when you have a lot of unemployment. So I think while some people would characterize it as being religious in Northern Ireland, the religious divide, I think I would have characterized it more as economic divide. And, if you have 90% of young boys unemployed between the ages of 16 and 20 anywhere in the world, I think you're going to see some unrest.
Always, yeah. Yeah.
So I would characterize the Troubles as being 80% economic.
Yeah. I think religion's a little easier. You can, if you put religion into something,
you can explain it.
Right. When you say economics, now fix that.
Yes. Yeah. But I think reality is anywhere in the world. If you have that type of economics, it's going to be a recipe for some trouble.
Do you carry lessons from that time? Because that's a very intense time in history. Do you carry some of those lessons, or what you saw, or how you even view the world? Sort of how does that dictate now?
Well, I think I definitely carry the lessons of the importance of looking after people and the importance of developing communities, healthy communities. I think I learned a big lesson through that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like the adults during those times, was it talked about? Was there a lot of discussion? Was it sort of accepted this is what we're dealing with now? Like how did people communicate that? Like someone like myself, I'm so far removed from it. It's you're the first person I've talked to that's actually even brought it up in a conversation.
Well, I wouldn't change the way I was brought up. It was something that we lived through and learned through. But there were, even through all that, we had many, many good times, and working on the farms and those kinds of things still are some of my best memories in life of taking in hay or doing the potato crops and things like that. I mean, I still look back on all of that very fondly.
Right.
Although I will say, economically, my family didn't have a car, for instance. We walked everywhere. But that's the way everyone was. So it was normal. And there were some great times, but definitely if you look at it from an economical perspective, there were huge challenges. And putting food on the table, I'm sure for my parents, created challenges at a lot of different times. Luckily, we had uncles and aunts that owned farms, and they provided us with a lot of what we needed. And for that, we did the labor on their farms. And
right.
So that was kind of how society evolved at that time. So tough times, but I would say very good times too.
Yeah.
Some of my memories are the best that I can think of, and a lot of laughs.
Yeah. Is it, again, this is a very outside looking in culture, and I'll ask this to both of you, that the culture of dancing and poet. I mean, some of the poet. I think you've got one of the Nobel Peace Prize.
Seamus Heaney,
on your wall here at the Forge.
Seamus Heaney was from. I grew up 4 miles from Seamus Heaney. Met him quite a few times in bars and pubs over the years, and got to know his family better than him. But certainly he was a big part of the culture around the area I grew up in. The Seamus Heaney Memorial and the Seamus Heaney, where he's recognized now, is a town called Balaki, which is actually 4 miles from where I grew up.
Oh,
yeah.
Where do you think that? I mean, it's obviously a huge question. There's years of history for that behind it. But where do you think that culture developed from?
I would say it's part of the colonization of Ireland. It took part over the years, and we hear of this in many countries around the world. If you look at things like Beyond the Pale, where you had to speak English to move into an area around Dublin to get employment. And many Irish people were driven out of there. They weren't allowed to speak their language.
Right.
They weren't allowed to show Irishness, sports or anything like that, or else you couldn't get a job. So I think it drove the Irish to developing their own ways of getting along, and that is through song and dance and entertaining each other out and that's where the culture of poetry and all of those things came from. I think is through that hardship that was created for many people, be forced away from their culture, the actual Irish culture. So I think that from that perspective, I think that's where much of the artists, the artists come from. The artists, whether that be through visual arts or poetry or music, which is huge in Ireland. And like if you look at a place like Derry City, just about everybody in Derry City that I knew was a musician. And they produced brilliant musicians because that was a way of surviving, to be honest. And if you listen to the song "The Town I Love So Well," they talk about that, about the women went to work and the men stayed home, and they played music in the bars at nights because there was no work for men. And so the women went to work in the shirt factories and all of that, but the men mostly played music. And that was how they survived.
How old were you when you came here?
I was 25 when I came here.
But I want to get into that story. I want you to jump into on some of the topics of coming here, because you have a similar experience of coming to a new country and starting a new life. And but I'll kick it off with day one. Day one, you land in Canada. Walk us through that day.
Well, I came. Probably a bit different experience than William, because I came as a musician. I couldn't get into Canada as a carpenter, but they would accept me as a musician. So I came here and immediately I was able to join a music group and try to make some money. And I did that for a couple of years until I got my landed immigrant status. And then I was able to go back to my trade and start to work that way.
So you couldn't work as a carpenter?
I couldn't work as a carpenter.
I see.
But I could work as a musician. And that was my story of immigration allowing me to get into Canada.
Yeah, a very similar story to my own, actually. I came here when I was 25 as well. And I'm a carpenter by trade, and I come from a big family in a small village in Ireland. But it's amazing the way things evolve, because when I came here in 2009, Laura, my partner, she, even though she had a degree in HR and business, she had to come on my visa because I was a carpenter. And the demand was so great for carpenters here. It's a point system. And I think carpenters were on the top of the list. And she was allowed come because we were a couple. Yeah.
Right.
It's amazing the way things change.
Yeah, in 1983, it was a recession time. Interest rates were through the roof.
Oh, really?
That time was going on at that time. So they didn't need carpenters. And but for some reason, they needed a musician, so I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, you played music actually before you came here, you immigrated to Canada, you played music in the Blarney Stone, which is right next door.
I did.
At a very young age.
When I was 16.
You from Ireland.
Oh, you came here too?
I came here twice prior to actually coming here to live, to play music in the Blarney Stone and some other venues around town. But when I was 16, my first visit to Vancouver was actually to play music in the Blarney Stone, and I celebrated my 17th birthday. There used to be another pub across the street called the Harp and Heather, and not many people will even remember that. But we went there, and that's where I actually saw my first Les Paul guitar, which was a big deal for me, being a 16-year-old. There wasn't too many Les Pauls, Gibson Les Pauls in Ireland. So
there's lots
of the memories you have, right?
Yeah.
There's love there, because I thought you were going to say my wife or something, because I saw this like look in your eye of it's a guitar.
I was 16.
So within a couple of years you could start doing carpentry. Let's do a big jump, because I want the audience to for anybody who doesn't know you, you're the mayor of Burnaby. There's probably a city somewhere that's building faster, but I don't know who they are. So Burnaby it's wild. I used to park my car in the Brentwood parking lot and take the SkyTrain downtown to go to school. And now there are, I don't know how many towers have gone up in even the last 10 years.
Yeah, there's, I believe, about 18 towers in and around that area now. And there'll be another 20 at least going in there. That will develop into a town center of over 60,000 people living there. And I think it's becoming an amazing area now. You're starting to see it all coming together with the square and the different businesses that are moving in there. And it's really going to be, I think it already is, a very exciting area.
Does it have an Irish pub?
No, and I've been encouraging William for a long time. We need a real Irish pub in Burnaby. So.
I don't want to upset my friend Daniel Frankel from Tap and Barrel.
We're going to get him there.
It's incredible to see. It's incredible to see what's going on over there, and credit to yourself and your team. I think the population, if I'm not mistaken, is about 30,000 at the moment, and it's going to double.
That's correct, yeah.
In the next 10 years?
Yes. And I think it's going to be the most exciting area in the Lower Mainland when it's finished with the plans there. But, credit has to go to the forefathers who, from the late 60s, really put all these plans in place. And so I can't take too much credit for it, because those plans have been there for a long, long time. It's been a great visionary, and I think the city of Burnaby has been very fortunate to have that sort of foresight before us. And we always say we walk on the shoulders of those who went before us, and I would definitely say that's the case here.
Wow, I wasn't aware that was in the works since the 60s. That's incredible.
Yep.
So that would have been before like the SkyTrains and all that, right? Yeah. That whole
the SkyTrain was put through there with all that in mind.
Right.
Because to justify having that sort of infrastructure, you really have to have the development around it to justify the big expenditure of having SkyTrains.
So how similar is it to that period to now? Because I mean, I'm sure visions change, design, architecture, all these things change. What was that foundation compared to now the current vision? How similar is it?
Well, I think we have continued to build on that and to learn more as we've gone along. Of course, no matter what you do in life, you make some mistakes, and I think we're learning to correct those. But I think the vision now is more with a lens towards climate change and a lens towards really mixed communities and trying to ensure that there's affordable housing included in all our developments now. Yeah. We all know that that's probably the biggest challenge in the Lower Mainland. As you as a business person, William, will know that if our workers can't afford to be in the city, it's going to be very, very hard to run a business. And I hear that from our Board of Trade all the time. So everything we do is look through those lenses with climate change, the livability, and making sure that everyone's treated fairly at the same time while we're trying to drive the city forward.
Well, that's what you say. It's a real challenge because when I drive by there, I drove by there today to come and do this interview, and where our team is in the car looking at it. Well, it looks exciting. Now you want to be a part of it. And it's right. You can see that skyline from the highway, right? So as people start to become aware of it, of course, they gravitate towards it. It brings in investment. So the affordable side is very challenging as you make something that's really attractive to people.
Right.
I'd actually be curious to just know the discussions that you're having, trying to find that balance.
So we've, one of the first things I did when I was elected was had a community roundtable on housing and what our people wanted to see. And we come up with a solution that any development that has more than 6 units has to have 20% of those units as affordable units. Burnaby affordable, what we call is 20% below CMHC average, which is about 60% of market rents.
Right. Okay.
And that's really workforce housing. Now, for us to get anything more affordable than that, we really need the other levels of government to chip in and help us.
Right. Yeah.
And hopefully someday they will start doing that. But until now, we haven't really seen that happen so much. But we have our own. And for that affordable 20% of affordability, we give the developers extra density. So that they can afford to put these in. So
hence those tall towers.
So that's
right.
kind of the deal
that's interesting.
We have. And the developers seem to have bought in that needs to happen. And they didn't like it at the start, but now I think they realize that it can work and does work.
Is that the reality? Does it have to come from, I mean, anybody who's watched me do interviews knows I'm about as capitalist as you get, but you've got to be, the government is designed to help run the country and then run communities. Does it come down to it has to be policy to be able to have any chance? Because it's so expensive in the Lower Mainland.
There's no doubt in my mind it has to be policy. Because if it's not driven that way, I mean, let's be honest, developers, honestly, they put in huge investments and they want to see a return for their money. And
they're tied into banks and they have a responsibility.
That's reality of life, and we all understand that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, my job and our job as government is to build a community that everyone can be part of. And so we had to bring in regulations to make that happen. We think we've done it fairly with developers by allowing them the extra density. And so there's always going to be adjustments to that along the way about how that's working. We review it every 2 years to see if it is working for all parties. It's been very well received so far. And so right now in the works, we have about 8,000 below market rentals in the works through the process right now. So from our perspective, it's working, and especially when we get these all built and up and running.
Yeah. And has there been a lot of support from like community, your team on council and that? Has it been pretty unified?
It's been very unified on where we need to go. And our Board of Trade are very supportive because those businesses are always in my ear about we're having a hard time finding a workforce.
So, Mayor Hurley, I'd like for you to tell us a bit about wearing the county colours for Derry. I believe you represented your county, which is a huge honour back home in Ireland. It's basically playing for your club at the highest possible level. And you played up as far as, I think you played minor and you played under 21 with Derry. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah. From South Derry is mainly a GAA stronghold, and it's basically a Gaelic football stronghold. And, my family were so engaged with our club. As you know, the club is really the epicenter when you're growing up in Ireland.
The true religion.
And we owe a great gratitude to all our clubs who did so much for us as kids. And I never forget that. But I had the honor of representing, first of all, my club at senior level, all levels, but senior level. Played full back and center halfback. So, played a pretty hard game. And and then I had the honor of representing my county at minor and under 21 levels. And but after that, I had a real serious knee injury at age 22. And then I was on to this kick of more into the music than I was into the football, and then coming here. But I played here for a lot of years too, and back in the days when we had trouble fielding 13 of us because the Irish community wasn't as big as it is nowadays.
Yes, and tell us a bit about how the Irish community has evolved since your time. I know when we came here in 2009 to now, the changes are phenomenal. I remember training in Strathcona Park on Sunday morning, and we couldn't get enough players to put a team together. And there'd be ladies and men there. Maybe you might get 12, you might get 14, and you'd have a kickabout or a game of hurling, or maybe both. But that's as much as we had. Now we have 8 clubs here in the GA community in BC, and maybe 20 plus teams. So that's my way, I guess, of measuring the success of the Irish here in BC. But how have you seen it evolve over the years?
Well, similar to yourself, when the years when I played, and we would be on our way to Seattle for a game, and we'd be stopping at everyone's house trying to guide someone into the car to come with us to play. And so we would finally get 13 on the field, but usually not more than that. So it's amazing to see how those clubs, I think there's 5 clubs now.
And 8.
There's 8 clubs here in Lower Mainland. They play out at Burnaby Lake when they have their big tournaments. Thankfully, I'm able to be part of that.
Thank you for that.
But, the last day I was down there was more than 1,000 people there, not just playing, but watching. And so it was quite an event. And you can see they seem to be a lot more serious than we were when we played over here back in the day, too. It's
the standard.
The competition is
it's very
high standard, both Gaelic football and hurling.
Yeah.
And camogie, too.
Yeah.
So camogie is the women's game that's played. So it's wonderful to see, and I can tell you when I go to Metro Vancouver meetings, for example, a lot of the engineers who are presenting there will be, Irish engineers, and they're always amazed when I can tell them where they're from because I know by the accent. But so the Irish community has really grown here and really playing a big part, and they're really dynamic too. I'm very impressed with the great efforts they make to be part of the community. But they're making a real difference because people like to hire the Irish workers from what I can see. So that's great to see. They're very well educated, and if they're tradespeople, they're usually very good tradespeople because of how they're trained. So it's great to see the wonderful Irish community we have here now. We just saw it on St. Patrick's Day.
Yes, we did. No, you're right. It's it makes you proud, to look at the reputation they have here. Yep. Not a week goes by without somebody coming to us and telling us about, a nice story about an Irish man or woman that works for them, and they're doing a great job. And it's nice to hear those success stories. And before we move on to our next topic, I'd just like to let you know that we're looking for some space as well for a Celtic cultural centre and a couple of playing fields. If you have any spare land over there in Burnaby for lease or for sale, let us know, keep us in mind. It's a long-term plan, but we have to start somewhere. No, I think that's kind of the next step, is to have a base. You see them in Boston, New York, San Fran, Chicago, the Gaelic parks and the likes. And I think something like that here would be in BC, somewhere in BC.
Sort of a community hub.
Yeah. Because right now we're kind of jumping around a lot. You never know when your next training session is going to be, or your next tournament, and you're constantly trying to secure those spaces to play your games. So it'd be nice to have our own. So is the
Irish community coming? Is it coming together, or is it growing? The Irish culture here that's developing. Is it because there's more people coming from Ireland, or is it just now there's people like yourself and that are creating these environments for people to get together, or is it both?
I would say it's maybe a mix of both, although there's a lot of young workers coming here on visas, and they think they're going to stay for 6 months, and then 6 years later they're still here. I think you were one of those.
Yes, I was.
So when they come here, they really like it, because it's a lot like home. It rains a lot, so it reminds them a bit of home, and I think they like the mountains and they like the outdoors that to get here. But it's definitely a growing community, especially with young people.
Right.
Yeah, so it's definitely a combination of both. I think there's about, I'll say, 25,000 Irish passports here at the moment, or somewhere around that. And, everybody, when I came here, I didn't know anybody. 2009, we didn't have a phone number. I didn't know any Irish in BC at all. But now I think it's a bit easier to come. And back then it was, you had to come on a 1-year visa. So it was a bit tougher. After 10 months, I had to prove to my employer that I was worth sponsoring and the effort and the commitment, so I could get my visa extended. But credit to the Canadian government, they have given the Irish in particular a 2-year visa now, right off the bat. So you can apply and get a 2-year visa. It makes it that bit easier. And because it's easier, a lot more people have been coming here. A lot of Irish immigrated in 2007, 8, 9 to Australia. And Australia is a long way away. And Canada, is a lot easier to get to. It's a lot less expensive. And I think that was a big attraction for the Irish to Canada. And then the 2-year visa was another big attraction. And we've seen the numbers just grow and grow year on year over the last, I'd say, 5 to 7 years in particular. And in particular in the summertime, we have a lot of summer students that come here. J1s, we'd call them. That was the visa you would get to go to the States back in the day. And people would go for the 3 summer months. But a lot of those are not going to the US now and coming to Canada as well, which is great.
Yeah. You mentioned also like carpenters, people are really happy with the work they do. I mean, you know that more than anyone. But I'm just wondering, is there something back in Ireland that's developing that skill set? Is it architecture? Is there schools? They're coming here with highly skilled workers. What's that sort of, training ground that they're coming from?
Well, I would say that, my training was City and Guilds. I don't know if that was the same in your part of the world, which was a 5-year apprenticeship. And, you really had to work hard to achieve.
5 years is a long apprenticeship.
Yeah, it was a long apprenticeship. And so really to get through, and the older tradesmen that I worked with were very, let's just say they weren't very gentle on how they...
We were talking about that last episode. Did you get yelled at as a child?
Yelled at was the easy part. So
that was a good day.
Yeah. So, but the tradesmen that I work with, they certainly demanded a lot from an apprentice, and part of that started out sharpening tools, and because you had the good eyesight and you could really sharpen tools well. Yeah. And they expected their tools to be sharp.
Yeah.
There was no, like when I did my trade, power tools weren't as big a thing then as they are now. So, I just think that if you go 5 years of training, you probably know what you're doing. when you come out.
Because I think a lot of apprentices here are only 2 years now, right? Isn't that right? Like plumbing in that?
Yeah, maybe 3 years.
3 years?
But it's a very different program, I think. But we done it through FOSS back in my day. And you would do a certain length of time on site, and then you would go into a university or college and do your theory in there. And it would go on for 5 years as well. And it was a very good program. And you know what? One of the big differences was, and I think a huge attraction for people to get into the trades back then, in particular for myself, was when the money was good. When you were doing the theory in the classroom, you got as much money as you did when you were out on site. That's not the case here, you know. So you were getting really good wages, whether you were on site or whether you were in the classroom. That attracted a lot of people to do apprenticeships in Ireland. And the training was very good. And a lot of people say to us here all the time how, you know, our training is so diverse and how we can do a bit of everything. Like we can do kitchens and cabinets and, you know, first fixing, second fixing, we'd call it, so crown molding or baseboard.
Right.
We can also do form work, you know, concrete work, and place and finish a little bit of concrete. So we're very well-rounded trades. And I remember coming here, people were kind of blown away by that.
But having said that, a shout out to another Burnaby school, which is BCIT. They run great programs there for trades.
They do.
Unfortunately, you know, what a lot of them, the young ones do now is they'll get on a framing crew and they will go with that framing crew and not finish.
Yeah, I see that a lot. Yeah.
Right? And,
yes.
And while that will work for a couple of years, I still think it's better to finish that apprenticeship out and become more rounded.
That highly skilled.
More highly skilled, but more, I think, more prepared for your future too, because framing is I would say framing is a young man's game. And if you want to be in it, not too many people are still framing at 50.
Yeah,
it's
true.
hard work.
And form work is...
So I think, well, BCIT is, if people finish the program at BCIT, I think they will come out very good tradespeople too.
Yeah, there's an issue with that. I don't know the stats. I won't pretend to, but there's and especially with young men not finishing programs across even in other university practices, and so it's good to highlight that to sort of encourage people to at least the mindset of if you're going in there, finish it and get your skill set.
Part of that may be with just what William said, and I'm not sure if this is the case. He said that they were still getting paid well when they went to school in Ireland. So that perhaps that's not the case here.
I don't think that is the case here, is it?
I don't think so.
No, but, not that I've ever heard.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that right there. Yeah. I mean, if you end up, there's a lot of 25-year-olds that they have families. Yeah. I mean, you're not taking 6 months off.
To pay rent.
Yeah. Your bills don't go away.
No.
Yeah.
So that, perhaps that's something that could be part of the reason for people not finishing out their full apprenticeship.
Yeah.
And it's things like that, though, that just sort of get, passed over and people don't really realize what's happening. And there's been points in my life I couldn't have gone back for training. Like, you make a mistake, maybe your car gets wrecked or whatever. That's the last thing you're going to do is take 6 months off. Yeah. And I want to jump back over to Burnaby as a city and then your role. It's a huge responsibility. I was kind of tongue-in-cheek saying musician to mayor, but that is actually exactly what you did.
Well, it wasn't right musician to mayor.
There was a couple years in between, right?
Yeah, I didn't go from rock and roll to mayor. No.
You fought a couple fires.
I built homes, so I understand what it's like to run a business. I understand having the payroll and what it's like to make all those ends meet when we're running a business. So I got through that piece of it, but then I became a firefighter too. So, and that was a big life changer for me because I really got an opportunity to help people and get to know my community. I was a firefighter in Burnaby for 30 years. So I got to know that community really well. And I got to know just about every street, every thing that wasn't happening as I thought it should be in the city. I got to know that through the work that I did on the fire department. Got to know the community really well. Got involved in a lot of charity work, leadership through union leadership, and through running our charities over the years. And certainly got to see sides of the community that needed help, and that hopefully I've learned enough from to recognize, what I can do to assist. But I think most of all, I learned to respect people, and to respect all the different cultures in Burnaby. 159 languages spoken in our city, and all the different cultures that are there, and I see them all as a big strength of our community, because we learn from each other, we listen to each other, and we learn. But at the very basic of every community that I see, one thing that ties us all together, we all want to look after our families. And it doesn't matter if that's Chinese community, it doesn't matter if that's an African community. The very basic thing that all people want to do is look after their families. And that's the one thing that can always tie us together. And I think it's the one thing that you really need to listen. And, there's a difference in listening and listening to answer. But if you can listen to what communities are telling you, you can really learn a lot. And I hope that's something I'm good at.
It's something. This is certainly a compliment. But I noticed that both times when you mentioned your family first and the family community, the Irish accent came out stronger both times.
Well, you're doing something right anyway, because you were re-elected recently, unopposed, right?
Yeah.
So congratulations.
Thank you.
Obviously very highly respected in Burnaby and beyond, and most definitely with the Irish community here. So I just wanted to say congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Certainly. You mentioned a couple learning people that needed support. I'm not forgetting the exact words you used, but was there a couple that stood out to you, whether like groups or people within Burnaby that you, during those firefighting years, that you went, that these people are not getting the support they need? Are there a couple that stand out to you?
Well, Burnaby had and one of the things that got me thinking of running for mayor was we used to have the dem evictions, and dem evictions was coined because of Burnaby, because we were tearing down buildings. People had lived there for 30 years and just saying, okay, go away. And those people, those were kind of affordable buildings to live in. And I didn't think that was right. I didn't think that we should be throwing our people out on the street. And that was really a group that I talked to a lot and tried to come up with some answers. When we tear down buildings, I think we're responsible to find alternate places where those people can live. And I think we've worked through our system and we're getting there, so that when a building is torn down, that responsibility is on the city and on the developer to ensure that the people who are being moved out have a place to go and can afford the place that they go. And we have done that through policy as well. We have also done through policy, and this goes back to the 20%, is that the people who are moved out of those buildings have the opportunity to come back paying the same rent as when they left.
Right.
So, community means enough to me that I know that people need to be looked after. You don't throw people who have lived in your city for 30 years and paid taxes in your city for 30 years. You don't throw them out in the street. And that was something that got me really thinking about becoming mayor. Hopefully I made a big difference, and we as a council have made a big difference there. And also the homeless situation, which is everywhere, all over the world. I think it's an issue. And as a firefighter, I got to see that.
Yeah.
I got to go in the bushes, see people frozen to the ground, and what that looked like. And
Did it change you?
It changed me a lot. And I can tell you the story of two young boys who, for whatever reason, fell out with their families and they were on the street. And I would go talk to them. I would take them for breakfast to McDonald's. This is long before, this is while I was a firefighter. And when I was at my fire hall, I would leave my car doors open so that they could come and sleep in my car at night. They were terrified. They were on the street and they were terrified. They were meeting lots of good people.
Mm-hmm.
And fortunately, we were able to bring their family and them back together and get them off the street. But, those things weigh heavily on me about how we look after our community. And it really saddens me to see people on the street in the richest country, one of the richest countries in the world. I think we can do a lot more, but I think it needs to start with not by trying to plug gaps, because there's bigger issues than that. But I think we have to develop ways to get people the help they need when they need it, not 9 months later. You can't tell someone who's on the street to make an appointment for 9 months' time. God knows where they'll be in 9 months. And so when people want help, they need to get the help. And I think it costs our society much more to keep people on the street than it would to look after them properly. Billions and billions of dollars that are being pumped into, for example, looking after the downtown east side, or that could be managed, my belief, in a much, much better way.
Yeah, it's a huge challenge.
Yeah,
it's a huge challenge. How do you both keep people on your side? And we probably need a whole other show to really talk through this, but in general terms, how do you keep people on your side as you're moving the city forward? And how do you deal with people that, for whatever reason, you don't work well together, or they're not fans of your policies, and striking that balance?
Well, you're never going to have 100% people
worried if you do,
no matter what you do in anything in life. But I think it's important to listen to those people because you learn from those people too.
Yeah.
You listen, you learn, you show them respect, and say, we're going to disagree on this one. However, I hear what you're saying, and I'll try to work some of what you said into our policies, but we just don't agree on everything. But I hear what you say. So I think acknowledging and respecting that everyone has a different point of view. Your point of view is probably very different than mine, but I don't think that should make us enemies.
Mm-hmm.
I think actually that's a good thing because we learn from each other, hopefully. Yeah. So showing your opponents respect and listening to what they actually have to say. Sometimes they're right, and I think you have to realize that no one is right all the time, including me. So I think having that respect for everyone who has an opinion, as long as it's not a hate opinion, of course. If you're talking hate, now we're talking about
there is a line, right? Somewhere.
But I think showing your opponents respect and listening is number one. Keeping people on side, I think, is my leadership style. Is I never ask anyone to do what I wouldn't do myself, and so you gotta do as you say, and you gotta always be leading in that way. We're going to go down this road. I hope you're with me, and but I think just showing that compassion, showing that honesty, I think, and bringing people on side with you. I think just being honest with people is really the key to leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, being open to feedback, I think, and embracing feedback.
Yep.
Open communication, stuff like that goes a long way. And as you said, respect.
Respect.
Yeah, give respect and you'll get respect. I have one question for you. If you were doing it all over again, is there anything you'd do differently?
Well, no. Actually, no. I think I've, in some ways, had a tough life, certainly. But I think that kind of upbringing, when you look back, makes you who you are. It develops you into the person you are. As I said earlier, I look back in my childhood, and boy, when I look back and I see what children have nowadays, it certainly wasn't easy.
You didn't have an iPad.
And it was difficult for our parents to put food on the table. That's just reality. But man, there were a lot of good times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A lot of good times and a lot of good learning. But certainly, I don't think there's much I would change. I would charge down the same path, make the same mistakes, and hopefully learn better from them than I did this time around. But no, I don't think so. I think I've been very fortunate in life and got some lucky breaks along the way, and been very proud of some of the work we've been able to do, especially with our charities around burn survivors and those things when I was part of the fire department. Those meant a lot to me. We built a building on 23rd and Main here in Vancouver for burn survivors and their families when they need help. Very proud of all of that work and my engagement with the different charities. So, but I've had a lot of lucky breaks along the way. I'll be the first one to say that. Hopefully, I always try to look out for people, and I think that's the number one thing I'll always try to do. I always say when I talk to members of my community, there are different times in life when you have an opportunity to lift people up, and I think you should always take that opportunity rather than walk away. So, hopefully, that's the leadership style I will always have.
You're doing a great job, and thank you.
Thank you.
Well done. What a great success story.
Thanks.
Mayor Mike Hurley, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Bye.